Welcome back to Central Valley Talk. I'm your host, Mike Briggs, and if it's Wednesday, the show is Artists and Authors. And funny thing happened last year, as year before, COVID hit us, and all of a sudden we couldn't have any guests in our studio, and we had to almost go out of business until we stumbled upon a miracle program called Zoom. And now not only are we interviewing Central Valley authors, we're talking to authors from all over the country, all over the world, and it's really been rewarding and a way better show because we get to talk to really cool people. Now, our first guest on Artists and Authors today is Dr. Gary Sprouse. Welcome, Dr. Sprouse.
Hi, how you doing, Mike?
And they call you the less stressed doctor, less stressed doc. And
That's
you help
my
people
goal.
kind of get their head straight around stress. And actually, you take it to the point where you're writing a book. Tell us about the whole thing.
All right, so the book is called The Highway to Your Happy Place. And I've been interested, that's about the 51st title that I've gone through. But it's like, that's the one that I think is encapturing the essence of this. And what I've realized is that people, when I say to people, I'm writing this book on how to have less stress, they go, oh, I need that book. And I'm like, but there's 1,000 books out there. What makes you think my book's going to work? And one of the things that I realize is when I say, well, if you had less stress, where would you be? And they never get that far. They just go, I just want to have less stress.
Yeah.
And what I realized was as I'm writing the book on, no, people need to have a destination. And the destination should be your happy place. And so in the book, I talk about how you define what your happy place is. And then I was like, well, that has to be the name of the book because that's where I want people to be.
Highway. Oh, by the way, I'm going to put up the cover of the book. There it is. It's not out yet. You guys don't start typing Amazon yet, I think. Highway to Your Happy Place, a roadmap to less stress.
That's right.
Now, where's all this stress coming from? People produce their own stress?
Well, so this is things that I've been learning as I go along. So what I found is that humans are the most stressed organism out there. And it's because we have these amazing skills. But the skills come with side effects. So we can envision the future, but the side effect is then you have to worry about it. And so traditional psychologists will say, well, just live for today. Well, first off, as a human, you can't live for today because there's just too much stuff going on in the future. And second off, why would I want to give up my greatest skill? How about I just give up the side effect? So this whole book is the idea is to say, hey, here's how to have less stress by reducing the side effects to our skills. So keep your skills, lose the side effects. So the book will talk about things like guilt and regret and worry and boredom and low self-esteem and being overwhelmed, which is what I see with a lot of my patients. And so what I talk about are very specific skills on how to have less of that.
Now, one thing you're talking about I want to delve into a little bit is one of the skills we have is thinking about tomorrow, predicting our future, kind of deciding what's going to happen. And you're saying some psychologists say, put that out of your mind to get rid of the stress. But you're saying people shouldn't want to do that. You want to look into the future, look forward to the future.
Right. So here's what I found. When I say to people, define worry, they get this look on their face like, yeah, I got that. And then they go, well, it's worry. And I'm like, even if they come up with a definition, I go, well, if that's your definition, then how would you fix that? And they're like, well, I don't know, right? So what I found was that with a lot of these things, our definitions exist. We know how to use them in a sentence. We know how they feel. But when you're trying to define them, it's very superficial, right. and it leads you to some place where you can't fix it. So my definition is envisioning the future, focusing on the bad things, and then having a fear response now. That's what worry is. So if that's the definition, and you go, first off, hey, isn't it great that I can envision the future? Because as I was saying, I have lots of patients with Alzheimer's, they can't look into the future. Oh. So they don't have that skill anymore. So they can't worry, but they're also not very successful.
Not very successful, yeah.
Second off, like we can envision the future and look at the bad things that could happen, but we have a choice. We could look at the good things. So if I sit around thinking, hey, what if I win the lottery? Well, that makes me feel good. What most people do, though, is they focus on the bad things. Yeah. And then that makes them worry. That makes them feel bad and gives them a fear reaction. And there's nothing to make that stop. Right. They can keep going on and on and on and on and on. So if you get a letter from the IRS, you can worry for a year before anything even happens.
Here's mine. Here's ours. In our little business here is in California, the rates for electricity have gone up. I know in a month from now, I have to raise $1,000 to pay that bill. And that's, I guess, my fear reaction.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So what I say to patients is, and that's what you're saying is what I'm trying to say is, I don't want you to stop worrying. What I want you to do is worry efficiently. So what I would say, so one of the tools that I have is called a worry sheet. And what I would say is write down what you're worried about. So in your case, you're worried about the $1,000 that you have to come up with. So then the next question is, well, how likely is it that I'm not going to be able to come up with $1,000? And I'm going to guess it's a pretty small percentage, but in people's minds, it can get pretty high.
Right.
And so then the next two columns are like, well, what can I do to make that happen? So you end up with a to-do list, and instead of you thinking about it over and over and over and over again, now you have a written down list, and you can show it to your producer, you can show it to your wife, you can show it to your friends and go, hey, can you think up any other ways that I can get this $1,000? And then the last column is saying, hey, what happens if I can't raise $1,000? What else can I do, right? Is there some other alternative? Is there some, right? And you, again, write that down, and then again, you can show it to people and say, hey, is there anything else you can think of? But by writing it down, then it's done, and you don't have to do it over and over and over again. So when you wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, you're like, what? It's already written down. Nothing I can do. That's all I can do, right?
Is that the roadmap?
That's part of it. That's one of the tools that's in there.
Yeah, that's good. Now, if I just put it out of my mind, I'm not going to worry about it because it's costing me too much stress, and at the end of the month, I'm in big trouble then. So
that's correct, right?
It's kind of important to face it then.
So I call it realistic optimism.
Okay.
So I want you to be optimistic. So I want you to think, hey, you know what? I got this. I'm going to get this $1,000. But I'm also going to make sure that I have my ducks in a row to make sure I get there, right? So like I talk about writing my book, like I want to be a successful author, and I want to help a lot of people have less stress. But I'm not naive enough to say, hey, I can't quit my day job yet, right? So I'm still working as a doctor. But that's my goal. But my focus is on this book's going to be successful and help a lot of people. That makes me feel good at night when I go to sleep, right?
It does. I bet it does. So there's a lot of tools in this book, I would imagine.
There is.
Yeah. Is it a big book, 1,000 pages?
Yeah, no. Well, it turns out that I'm a very succinct guy, right? So when I started writing, I'm like, oh, am I even going to make like 100 pages? 200? So it'll be about 200 pages when it gets done. So, but here's what I say to people. One of the things that I realize when people are under a lot of stress, the things they don't have money, they don't have time, and they don't have attention span because they're stressed out, right?
Yeah.
So the way this book is set up, you don't have to read the whole book. Just read one chapter. Like if you aren't bored, don't read that chapter. If you're overwhelmed, read that chapter. If you're worried, read that chapter. So you could read one chapter, and here's what I say to people, it'll change your life for good.
That's good. By the way, back in the 70s, we'd read these success books and listen to tapes on how to be a success and stuff like that. What I learned from that period is sometimes you need a new way of thinking. And that's what it sounds like this book will do, is give you a new way to think through things.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. So to be honest with you, as I've been writing the book, I've had some changes in how I view things. So one of the things that I've been coming to the conclusion is that people, when they're stressed out, what they feel is they feel out of control.
Yeah.
They got all these things happening to them, like what you just said with the pandemic. You know, you got this pandemic. You didn't choose to have a pandemic. Nope. You couldn't stop the pandemic from happening. But what you do have control over is how you react to it.
Yeah.
And so what you did was you went online and did Zoom meetings. And so even though you had this stressful thing happen to you, you reacted to it in a positive way. And in the end, it made your show better, right?
Yeah, way better. So, thank you, COVID.
So, yeah. So what I say to patients is, look, you might not be able to control the things that are coming at you. What you can control is how you respond to them. Okay. But here's where the book comes that's important, because I've seen that line in other places. But when you're trying to react to the things that are coming at you, if you don't understand what your reactions are, like you don't understand what worry is, you don't understand what guilt is, well, then you can't really do it very well.
Yeah.
And so when you understand what guilt and regret and worry and being overwhelmed is, then, and I show you some tools, now you can really react to it in a positive way. And now you get, and this is what I say, our choices lead to control. So like you had a choice, like 20 years ago, you wouldn't have had that choice. Mm-hmm. Like you would have been stuck. So now you go, hey, I have a choice. I can go on Zoom, or I can keep doing a live show and not be able to do the show. Right. But you made the choice, which then gives you a sense, hey, I'm in control. And that's what people are missing.
Well, I know the book's not out yet. I can't wait for it to come out. But in the meantime, what would people find if they went to the website, thelessstressdoc.com?
Well, right now there's some small advices and some links to some other podcasts that we've done. What I'm actually in the process working on right now is doing an online course.
Ah,
So I've written up about three-quarters of it, and we're going to start filming it like the beginning of May, maybe the end of May. And so there'll be an online course. It's going to be broken up into the 6 chapters, and each module will have like 15-minute segments. So it's going to be like 4 15-minute segments.
nice.
But one of the bonuses things that I did a seminar the other day for how to help people have less stress, and I invited this a friend of mine that I'd met, and she does Reiki sound baths. I don't know if you've ever heard of this,
A little bit,
but
yeah.
it was freaking awesome, right? So my wife is now addicted to it. Like, so she does it once a month. So we go down there, and it's this great relaxation technique. So, and part of what we're going to do then is on that module. One of the bonus modules is going to be a Reiki sound bath that you can do
Nice.
online.
Reiki sound
So.
bath, yeah. Now, I always ask, who's your audience? I'm pretty successful business here, but I've already picked up some things from you just in this short talk where I say, I want to get this book, of course, maybe take this online course. Who should take this?
So here's what I found, right? So when I'm learning how to be an author, what I keep hearing is you have to have a target audience. And if you don't have a target audience, then you don't really have an audience, or you don't know what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So my impression is that more women tend to buy books. And here's the more important, more women tend to ask for advice.
Ah.
So men tend to minimize things.
Yeah.
And so they go, hey, I got this. So they're just as stressed out as women are,
Yeah.
but they don't typically ask for help, and they don't typically buy a book to get that help. But what I say to people is, if you have a mind and you're a human, then you can get something from this book.
You can get something from it. Like I say, I already am picking up a few ideas, and anybody could use it. I guess that's the answer. Anybody could use it who's not under stress. But more, I want to go back to, it just gives you another way of thinking things through.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So here's what I've learned is that, and I'm a doctor, right? So I went to school, went to the psychiatry stuff, and you get these definitions, but they're really superficial. I feel like in the psychiatric world where we were with diabetes 300 years ago, where you would test somebody's urine and it would taste as sweet. You go, oh, you have diabetes. That's all I knew. I just knew your urine was sugary, right? And so my advice was, eat less sugar,
Yeah.
which worked for some patients, right? But as we learn more and more about diabetes, we learned it has to do with your pancreas and your stomach enzymes and your liver and your transport mechanism. And now our tools are way better than they were even when I started, which is 30 some years ago. So I feel like this book is doing that to stress. And it's saying, these are the ingredients. This is what makes things stressful. Well, here's what worry is. Here's what guilt is. Here's what regret is. And then you go, if I understand more about what it is, then the tools that I can make are going to be way more effective.
Right. Well, do you know when the book's coming out?
So it should come out either the end of June or early July.
I can't wait.
I can't either.
Dr. Sprouse, Dr. Gary Sprouse, I should say. I'm way over time. I'm getting the signal, where when I've gone way over. I could talk to you for hours because this is fascinating, and you present things in a way that's very easy to understand. And I'm sure your book is going to do the same. Any last thoughts for our viewers?
Yeah, so here's what I want to say to people. Do not resign yourself to feeling like you're under a lot of stress and there's nothing you can do about it. There is something you can do about it. You do not have to live your life stressed out. Read my book, read anybody's book, but I think my book will help you more because of the way it's set up. So that's what I would say. Do not resign yourself. Do not give up.
And by the way, I think I'll close out. I'm going to leave a cover of your book up there for a few minutes so people could write it down and get ready to buy it. Thank you, Dr. Sprouse. I sure appreciate you coming on the show. Excellent. And I'm excited about this. I don't get excited. I read every day a lot, and but this has really got me excited. And
Cool.
I wish you good luck with this.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. We'll be back with more Central Valley Talk right after this.